Brick Mansions is a place where the law doesn't work. Here, power and speed rule. When a detective ends up here, he will face betrayal where he least expects it and find an ally in a former convict to stop an explosion that could take millions of lives. The story takes place in dystopian Detroit, where the authorities have sealed off the most dangerous area with a wall, turning it into Brick Mansions, a lawless zone ruled by criminals and dealers, where schools and hospitals are closed. At the same time, many innocent people live there, tired of the crime around them. Lino, a former prisoner of French origin, lives in this isolated area, but actively fights against local criminals. He stole a batch of illegal powder from a local gang and destroyed it in the bathroom by pouring acid on it. But the thugs quickly came after him. They obey the leader, who is essentially the mayor of this isolated area, Tremaine Alexander. He instructed K2 to find Lino. Two of Lino's allies were guarding the entrance to the apartment building, but Tremaine's men quickly eliminated them. They broke into the homes of peaceful locals and ordered the men to show them where Lino was. In apartment 29, Lino himself heard what was happening. The criminals were already standing at his door, but he took preventive action and, instead of waiting for them to break down the door, he broke it down himself and ran away, dodging each of them in the hallway. He skillfully used all the objects in his path. Lino ran into a stranger's apartment and used their window to get outside, and simply greet him on the way. K2 and Reza have already found the destroyed goods, and it looks like Tremaine is going to be angry. Lino, with his crazy parkour moves, has already climbed onto the roof and even spun around like on a pole, but the two criminals are still chasing him. But he ripped the belt right off one of the men's pants and will find a better use for it. Lino rode the belt like a zipline to the neighboring roof. They threw a grenade at him, but he managed to jump to the next roof at breakneck speed, better than any superhero. Meanwhile, on the other side of Detroit, there lives Damian. He's a detective who's been working undercover. He's gained the trust of George, a dealer who works with Tremaine, making and selling stuff in this part of Detroit. George was having lunch with his assistants when K2 called him. They need to deliver goods to the Brick Mansions because Lino destroyed the previous shipment. No one wants to go there in the evening, but Damian is the one who volunteers. Meanwhile, Tremaine is cooking at his base. He cuts peppers for curry with his special cleaver, but as Tremaine noted, if his mother knew how much pepper he added to her curry recipe, she would turn over in her grave. K2 came with bad news. They let Lino escape. The boss gave a clear task, to bring Lino and 44 pounds of stolen goods, but instead, K2 came with news that 5 of their most agile men had passed away during the chase. Tremaine made it clear that he was not joking and shot one of K2's assistants. 6 people had already been eliminated, so if K2 didn't bring Lino, he would be the 7th. K2 had a plan. He wanted to find Lino's girlfriend, Lola, because he was sure that Lino would come for her. Damian arrived with George at a secret location. At first glance, they entered an ordinary laundromat where a Chinese man was working. Damian immediately demonstrated his knowledge of Chinese language, which impressed George. The Chinese man gave them a coin, and it opened one of the washing machines, which was actually a door to the factory. The next time I see a washing machine, I will think about this. A van with police officers was waiting on the street for a command from Damian, and Damian pressed a button that transmitted the location to his partners in the van. George fed the fish in the fish tank and explained that even low-quality goods from Asia increase in price when they reach the United States. Suddenly, they noticed a van on the cameras that shouldn't have been on the street. The police. George raised the tension in the room and aimed his gun at each of the suspects. But he did not suspect Damian, but another member of the group, and shot him on the spot and ordered everyone to leave the building along with the goods. Damian signaled the police to enter, and George's team was surrounded. Damian came out of undercover and threatened George. The whole group threw their weapons into the fish tanks on the police officer's orders, but he didn't take one thing into account. The lifeless member of the group also had a weapon, and one of the men picked it up from the floor. At that moment, George managed to run out of the building, and Damian was left alone against several men. A man with an axe attacked him, and Damian dodged it like Neo. He also threw powder directly into the man's face. The important thing was not to lose George, so Damian fled, leaving the police reinforcements to deal with the group. George's driver picked him up, but Damian managed to grab onto the car. The driver maneuvered, but the cop held on tight. George fired several shots from his pistol, to no effect. So he took out his SMG. Damian managed to open the trunk with a lockpick while the car was moving. The bullets hit the trunk, causing it to fly off, and Damian was able to get inside the car, where he quickly pushed the driver out. George tried to stop the cop in a hand-to-hand fight, but they crashed into the police station building at breakneck speed. It seems that the undercover work is complete, He can remove his contact lenses and wash the dye out of his hair, and most importantly, find Tremaine and begin his revenge. Damian is certain that Tremaine Alexander was involved in his father's assassination. He was also a police officer, and his life was cut short while on duty in the brick mansions. The only family member Damian has left is his grandfather, who is unsure about the idea of revenge and worries about his grandson's safety. Tremaine has good connections with the district border police, so K2 and Reza easily escape isolation. They head to a cafe where Lola, Lino's girlfriend, works as a waitress. She tries to run away but fails, and they take her to the boss. The base is swarming with Tremaine's allies. The boss untied Lola's hands and demanded information about Lino, but the girl said she hadn't seen him in several years. Tremaine didn't have to wait long before Lino jumped out of the glass roof and pointed a gun at him. The boss ordered everyone not to move or shoot. His courage diminished when a .45 caliber was pointed at his neck. Lola controlled K2, Lino controlled Tremaine, and at that pace, they moved towards the exit. Tremaine's obedient allies did not shoot. Lino took Tremaine's Mustang, and they epically kidnapped the boss from the base, even though a whole gang was chasing them. Lino's main demand is that Tremaine stop dealing illegal substances in the area. He wants to take the gang leader to the police at the border, but I'm afraid he's in for a disappointment. The police at the border have long since sold out to Tremaine, and these corrupt officers are not going to arrest him. When Lino brought the criminal to them, they arrested not Tremaine, but Lino himself, and Lola remained a hostage of the gang. A corrupt officer approached the bars, as Lino kicked his head off with a few moves. Meanwhile, in the Detroit mayor's office, Damian met with the mayor to discuss the job. It was the loss of Damian's father that was the last straw for the government and prompted them to build a wall separating the brick mansions from the rest of the city. The mayor claims that last night, a government vehicle carrying a neutron-controlled device was stolen. Damian's task is to find the device, enter the code, and cancel the explosion. The device is in the brick mansions and is now in the possession of Tremaine. Damian is assigned a former convict, Lino, as his partner. Lino was once imprisoned for the elimination of a police officer, which already disturbed Damian. However, there is no choice, as he cannot find other allies in the brick mansions. The officers put Lino in a police car to take him to prison, when suddenly Damian was thrown in there too. On the way, Damian pulled a lockpick out of his mouth and managed to remove his handcuffs and climb over the roof to the driver's seat, eliminating the two officers in the cabin. Lino was shocked by this turn of events. They stopped under a bridge, and Damian freed him from his handcuffs. Lino wanted to take the van for himself, but Damian wasn't going to give it up so easily. The two fought over the car, but in the end, Damian won, and the only thing left for Lino to do was to join him on the road, jumping in as best he could, flexibly through the window. The route led to brick mansions. They discussed their goals, and it turned out that both were looking for Tremaine, but the police were hot on their heels. Damian skillfully drove around the checkpoint, ramming through an empty warehouse area. But oh no, the brakes failed. Damian suggested getting out of there as quickly as possible, but Lino was no fool. He handcuffed Damian to the steering wheel, immediately realizing that Damian was a cop. When Lino left, the owner of the car they had rammed into arrived. Trouble. But Damian hit him and ripped the steering wheel out of the car to free his hand. A gang of guys was already waiting for him, and he fought well until the shooters appeared on the roof, so Damian had to run away. Meanwhile, at Tremaine's base, Lola is chained to a chair, and Tremaine already knows that Lino has managed to escape from the police. The boss ordered Reza to watch over the girl and left. Lino was watching all this from a neighboring building when suddenly handcuffs were put on his hand, and a familiar voice sounded behind him. Damian is impressed that Lino figured out who he works for. The detective had placed a bug in Lino's pocket during the fight, so it was easy to track him down. Damian shared his goal of defusing the bomb and taking revenge on Tremaine, but Lino doesn't trust the police or anyone else. Lino needs to free Lola, so they have no choice but to work together to achieve their shared goals. Lino doesn't want to think about any deep plans. He just took Damian's phone and called Tremaine with the words, "I'm already on my way." Reza likes to play with people like toys, but Lola won't let her crazy fantasies come true. Lola managed to free herself from the handcuffs, but Reza didn't let her escape. The girls fought hand to hand until Lola grabbed Reza's whip and chains, but Reza almost strangled the girl with her chains. Just in time, Tremaine told her to be careful over the CB radio. Damian and Lino brazenly entered the base through the main entrance, and the guards immediately surrounded them with weapons. Tremaine's chief bodyguard, nicknamed Yeti, also approached. On the way, Damian saw the stolen car in which the bomb had been brought. Damian did not plan to say who he was, but Lino was straightforward and immediately revealed that he was a police officer and had come for an explosive device. Tremaine's men opened the window, and Damian saw that the device was already being prepared for use. But even worse, Reza brought Lola out and tied her to the device with a chain. This provoked a violent reaction from Lino. Tremaine wants $30 million. Only then will Damian be able to enter the code on the bomb. The detective called the mayor and said that there were 48 minutes left before the explosion and that they needed $30 million to stop Tremaine. While the criminal was already dictating his offshore bank account number in Hawaii, the mayor said that nothing would work out, as the city was on the verge of bankruptcy. Damian was refused in money, but he did not show it and pretended to criminals that they would transfer the money soon. Tremaine waits, seemingly hesitant. He still suspects that someone is trying to deceive him, but in reality, he himself does not know exactly what this bomb is. K2 stumbled upon it, and stealing the van was very easy, as there were no guards. But such easy money should not be trusted. Lino and Damian were taken to a separate room, and guarded by a man facing the counter. Damian told the truth about his father, and Lino understood the policeman's motive for revenge and knew something had to be done. Lino pretended to have a seizure and not be able to breathe, and the naive guard fell for it and led them down the corridor to the medical office, where the two suddenly made a frantic jump and ran away. The K2 guys chased after them, but Lino still found a way out through a tiny gap under the ceiling, where he squeezed through. But for Damian, it looked impossible. But Damian made it through, just in a different way. On the street, a man was looking after Tremaine's Mustang, but Damian knocked him out with a pipe, so the Mustang is now theirs. The gang is already breathing down their necks. Damian drifts them out of the situation, but that's not all. A sniper was waiting for them on the roof. He hit the window, which disoriented Damian, and he crashed into a pile of tires. The gang is already closing in. Lino and Damian hid in an old school bus, but when Lino looked out, a dozen armed men were waiting for them, who, on K2's orders, shot at the bus. Lino and Damian managed to escape through a hatch in the floor. 2 cars full of armed men followed them, but the plan was for them to crash into each other, so Lino and Damian split up and ran around the house. Then when they got close to each other, they threw bricks at the windshields to cause the cars to collide. What happened next was pure luck. The sniper missed the detective, and when he was aimed directly at the motionless Damian, he ran out of ammunition. And when he changed the magazine, the 2 parkourists were simply no longer there. Instead, they were already behind him, and Damian took the sniper rifle for himself. Tremaine's people constantly checked the offshore account, hoping to see a transfer from the mayor. But no, the money in the account is decreasing. Tremaine ordered Reza to prepare for launch. Lola still believes that Lino will be able to stop everything. Suddenly, Damian hit the rocket control panel with a sniper rifle. He also started shooting past Reza to scare her and get her away from the control panel. She passed the information on to Tremaine, and he and the gang went out on a thorough search for Damian and Lino. They lowered the emergency stairs and headed upstairs. Tremaine and Yeti also moved toward the explosives on the roof via the internal stairs. But Lino and Damian weren't in that building. They had to be in the one next door. Lino calculated his steps to jump into the window of the neighboring building, which seemed crazy to Damian. Lino gave the order, "Don't think, just jump." Damian did it, but if it weren't for Lino's help, he would probably have ended up in the crosshairs of the gang standing below. Tremaine ordered Yeti to block the way to the roof, thinking that it would be no problem for a giant like him. Lino and Damian were waiting for a 2-on-1 fight against someone who was significantly stronger than them. All of Damian's hand-to-hand blows were like a joke to Yeti. He didn't feel them. Lino used his agility to his advantage, wrapping a nearby rope around Yeti. The partners restricted the giant's movement from both sides, and Lino jumped and smashed a concrete building block over Yeti's head. The way to the roof was now clear. Tremaine connected the contacts on the bomb's control panel, and the countdown continued. Less than 7 minutes remained, but at the last moment, he changed his mind. He had been bluffing with the bomb. He was a businessman and wanted money. He had no intention of eliminating millions of people, so now he wanted to find Lino and the detective so they could deactivate the device. But Reza didn't like that. She wanted a spectacle, and for him to keep his word. She pointed her gun at him, and in response, he wanted to get his gun, but without waiting, the woman fired. Lola attacked Reza from behind and threw her off the roof of the building. Since Tremaine was wearing a bulletproof vest, he survived. Lino and Damian arrived in time. Lola was saved, and Damian demanded an explanation for his father. Tremaine did not know what he was being accused of, so he revealed the truth to Damian. His father was shot by his own police partner, not by someone from Tremaine's gang. Damian is furious and doesn't believe him, throwing Lino's phone with the bomb code at him, 48216. It's the Detroit Brick Mansions area code. It's a trap. Tremaine, Lola, and Lino try to convince the detective not to enter the code. Words don't work on him, so Lino has to stop him by force. But Lino's attempts were useless, and in the last few seconds, the only thing left to do was to appeal to Damian's common sense. The mayor told him that the van had been stolen, but when they entered the base, there were no traces of the harpoon, which did not match the mayor's story. And when the countdown ended, nothing happened. If Damian had entered the code, he would have destroyed the brick mansions in Detroit. That's exactly what the mayor wanted, to use Damian's hands to commit this cruel crime against the residents of his own city. Tremaine admits that he has done many bad things, but he is definitely not involved in the death of the detective's father. At that moment, Damian threw away his badge. They decided to return the bomb and figure everything out. Chaos reigns in the City Hall building. A gang has occupied it, while Damian and Lino peacefully take the elevator to the mayor's office. Armed, they burst into the office with Tremaine and the gang and brought the device with them. Damian demonstratively begins to enter the code and asks the mayor to enter the last digit. The mayor loudly admits his plan. He sent the bomb there to get rid of what he considered to be the biggest problem. He cynically devalues the lives of innocent people living behind those walls. And that's enough. He has already made a full confession. Damian recorded it all on a recorder, and their man on the roof of the neighboring building recorded everything on camera. In a few minutes, it will be all over the news across the United States. After that, the mayor was arrested, and schools, hospitals, and police stations resumed work in the area, and the walls that had separated the brick mansions for so long were simply dismantled. While Lino was teaching the school children how to parkour, Damian arrived. Tremaine is now running for mayor, and he also gave Damian a new BMW, which the detective drove to visit his grandfather. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on interesting movies.